Hey everybody, my name is Noah Bernardi. I am a senior here at UConn DMD Stores, and today we're going to be doing some very basic character modeling, lighting, and rendering within Cinema 4D. This is the application that we're going to be using, but you're more than welcome to use any other digital content creation application like Blender, Unity, Maya, or anything like that. We'll start off with a very basic modeling technique by making the base, which is going to be the pot of our cactus. So there are a couple of ways we could do that. We could stack cylinders on top of each other by going into objects here and do that. But I wanted to show you this is more advanced modeling technique called a lathe. So for a lathe to work, we need a profile in which to rotate the profile 360 degrees. So I'm going to start by going by middle mouse into middle mouse click here, or you could click the window up here in order to split up our four views. I'm just going to go to the front view, and I am just going to make the base profile of our pot. So for pot, we're just going to try and make everything a little bit more even. We're going to zero out this base point here, and we'll just make everything play nice when we rotate it. So I'm just going to set to even values. X to 30, Y will also do 30. Do 45 and 30 on this one. 45 and 45. 0 and 45. And this is using a non-destructive, or what you call a procedural approach to modeling. So this is when the operations are connected but not final. So it allows for operations to be inserted between steps and affect downstream actions. And this is a really powerful technique if you want to make quick iterations. So we have our profile. We just want to drag it underneath our lathe. You notice it gets essentially rotated 360 degrees. So I noticed that maybe this part of the pot is a little too wide, so we can go back in to our front view. Let's deactivate the lathe object. In our spline, we can just go in, select these 2 points here, and just bring them in a pinch. And now when we turn back on the lathe, you notice that everything is updated. And then maybe we want to increase the height of the pot. We can select the points while the lathe is enabled so we can get real-time feedback of what is actually being affected and what's going on. So we have the base shape of our pot, but we can go in and add some additional details if we wanted to. So for example, we can make the pot essentially have a cutout here. We can do that by hitting Control and have our pen tool selected, and we can add additional points in here. We can drag them down. You notice this is not what we want. We want more of like a 90-degree angle. So we can just select our pen tool again, add another cut here and here, select these inner points, drag them down. But we still have this angle. We can easily just select these 2 points, hit T for enabling scale, and we can just, or you can hit up the scale tool up here and drag them in, hit shift to get increments of 10% every time, and then zero them out. Hit T to scale. There we go. Now if we go back into our lathe, notice, oh, we missed a spot. So we can go back in to our pot here, and since this, this is the area right here, we can just delete these guys. And we notice, okay, this guy's at, change it to, so we copy this value of the we want y, and just copy and paste that y value so it's equal. And we don't need this point here, so we're just gonna delete it. Now if we enable lathe, great. We have a pot with more of a inside that we want. Um, and then we can also go back in, maybe add a little bit of a taper edge to this pot and give a little bit more visual interest. And then again, I think I'm gonna bring these guys in just a little bit more. Yeah, that's really good. That's what I want. Perfect. We can also adjust the subdivisions. So if I go to display, we have all the different display modes here. We'll also have shortcuts that we can use. I usually use an F quite a lot. This way I can see the wireframe mode of our object and still maintain some of the shading, or NB, to get have the lights affect the object. So if we go into our lathe, we can adjust the subdivisions. You notice our object becomes a lot more dense. So if you're going for like a low poly vibe, we can achieve that with this. We're gonna bump it up to, let's say, 32, so we don't see too many of the polygons in our object. Because we're trying to do this as procedurally as we can and maintain um, an easy way to go back and iterate if we need to, we're going to add some fillets or bevels to these edges, because right now they're completely sharp, and in order to achieve a little bit more realism in our model, we're going to add a little bit of a curvature to these edges, because nothing in real life is perfectly sharp. So to do this, we're going to add in the modifiers tab here a bevel deformer. So it kind of gives you an idea of what's going to happen in this little image, in the object here. But if we want it to work with this lathe, we need to put it in the same group. So we can add a null object, and this is essentially like a folder, or we can just select everything and hit Alt G, and it groups it into null. You notice right away the bevel effector is affecting our pot, but it's not really getting the effect that we want. So in order to just do the edges of the pot that we want, we can turn on use angle. You notice right away it's working, it's giving a nice clean edge to these edges and not the actual faces of the pot. But right now they're a little too sharp, so we can add a couple subdivisions in, give it a little bit more curve, and this is looking really nice. We can adjust the offset, so how maybe you want 0.5 and give us a little smaller curvature of the edge here. I'm noticing we still see some of the polygons here in our pot, and we can go back into our lathe object and increase the subdivisions to say 45, and we're not getting so many of those anymore. So this is looking really good. Great. And it's also just really good practice to name your stuff in your objects panel here. So we're going to just name this pot. I'm going to name the spline to base form. Lathe is just a lathe, and bevel is just a bevel. It's also good in any digital content creation application that you're using to maintain a sense of hierarchy, especially in cinema where it really does matter. So right now, the program is essentially thinking that the bevel deformer comes first and then the geometry is being created, but we want the geometry to be created first and then the bevel deformer. And this just fixes any issues. If we were to animate this, um, some issues could happen with the order of the hierarchy. Great. So now we have our pot. Now let's make the cactus. So for the actual cactus part, we're going to use a sphere. We're going to move it up T to scale it down, get it to the general size in relation to the pot. I'm just going to bring it down below the pot and put it in its own null object. So we're going to do that, hit Alt G. I'm just going to name this Cactus. Cool. I'm going to name this to base Cactus. So if we hit an F or just go to display and again change any of these settings so we can see the wireframe of our geometry, you notice it has a pole on the top and bottom, and this isn't great for creating like a character. So we're just going to change the type to a hexahedron and get more even distribution of quads throughout the mesh and mitigate any of the holes that we might have. So once we have our sphere in, we can add a deformer. So we're going to add the FFD deformer to our mesh. So if we can hold shift and then click on FFD, and that'll automatically make it a child of our base cactus sphere. We can adjust the grid point size here. I think I'll just leave it on 222, and we can go to the points mode here and middle mouse click and drag to adjust the size of the selection brush, and select the points and just select and move the points to get a cactus shape that we want. So I'm just going to bring these down and bring them in a little bit. We do so with these guys here. So this is looking really good. Make sure to look from all directions and not just front direction, because we notice it looks a little too fat here. So we're just going to take these guys and just scale them in a little bit. So now it's looking uniform, which is what we want. We can adjust the FFD, add another grid points in the Y, and we can add in, make sure we select all of them, add in a little bit of curvature, which is looking really good. Cool. Maybe scale them in a little bit too. Go to our top, give it a little bit more of a flat base. I just want to scale these guys in a little bit. Great. We just take the base sphere and just move it over a little bit so we get it more centered into the pot. Actually, yeah, move the base sphere. And maybe I'll increase the overall height just a little bit more. Great, it's looking good. So now we have our base cactus. We can focus on the arms now. So to do the arms, because I wanted to maintain like this curvy shape, I'm just gonna copy the base cactus. I'm just gonna rename it arm, and it's exactly identical to the base cactus. And we're just gonna select our sphere, just resize it, push it out a little bit, size it, and just move it into position. We can go back into the FFD. Let's just turn off by hitting the check mark, the base cactus and FFD. And also alt click and click the stoplights to turn them off, so we can just focus on the arm and get the shape that we want. So we want a little bit more curvature. Scale it in just maybe a little bit more. Maybe bring these guys down. I gotta select 4 of them. Bring them down a little bit. like these guys. Scale them in. Great. Bring back the main cactus. And it's looking a little small, so we're just going to select the sphere. Just scale it up a little bit. And we're just going to copy and paste the arm. And we are going to go to global coordinate system. So now if we want to rotate it just 180 degrees, it's very difficult to do so. So we can just hit it so we use global coordinates, and then we can just adjust it, hit shift to get equal increments of 10. You can hit global, just move it over. Great. Maybe just move it up a little bit, get some variation in the distance of the arm, and just adjust FFD so it doesn't look like we copy and pasted the same exact cactus. Great. Go back to regular shading mode, and it's looking pretty good. So I'm just going to hit the stoplights on the FFDs here. Also, I'm going to take the arms and drag them into the cactus. Just put the base on first because it's just good to be organized. And we're just going to rename one. This one is, oh, this one's right. This one is left. Great, so we got our first cactus. Good to go. You notice that it does have some issues here. We can actually see the polygons, and we can mitigate this. So there are a couple ways we can do this. We can go in and hit this object here, which is a subdivision surface, and it subdivides the geometry. So if we hold Alt and then click, it'll automatically make it a child of the subdivision surface. So if we go back to regular shading mode, it gets rid of those topology issues that we had before. We could also go in and use a smoothing deformer. Where are you? Smoothing. Hold shift and it makes it a child. Put it after the FFD, and it doesn't do exactly what we want it to do. So I think the best option would be using the subdivision surface, or we could increase the total segments of our sphere. So let's try to bring this to 48. Yeah, it does so, but I think the subdivision surface does a better job of smoothing out the overall profile of the object. I'm going to apply this to the arms as well, so we get some nice curvature in our shape. I'm just going to rename these accordingly. So now we just rename the cactus to make sure we know what exactly is what. I also save the project. It's always good to save every now and then, more often than not anyway, to make sure if it crashes, you still have a backup of a relatively recent project. So now we're going to make a little bit more details. So we're going to do the mouth first for our cactus. So we're going to go up here to the pen tool and go to the sketch, middle click, go to the right view, and just create a base shape for the mouth. And the sketch tool is literally what it sounds like. You can sketch anything and it turns it into a spline. So we're going to kind of sketch a base mouth shape. Now mine is not the best, but that's okay because we could go to the spline smooth, run it over, and it smooths it out. So if we go back into our pen tool, we can delete some of these extra points. We can also add some points as well. So I'm just going to move this one down, this one up. We go back and smooth it again. That's not really what I like. So we're just going to try a different approach. Maybe using an arc. Change the end angle to 180. Change the radius. Hit E to enable movement. rotate it because we want our cactus to be happy. We want a happy cactus. Hit C to make it editable, or click editable object up here, and we're going to connect these two splines together, and boom, we have our happy mouth. So we're going to take our arc, bring it down here, and we're going to put it into an extrude operation here. So we'll make it a child, boom, it's extruding. However, it's kind of going the wrong way. That's okay. So if we go into the object mode, just rotate our spline, it'll get the orientation that we want it to be in. We're going to change the distance to, let's say, 10. I'm going to go to caps. Because these have sharp angles, we can adjust them in here. We're going to change it to a fillet cap. And a fillet cap. Change the radius to 1. And the steps, let's do 4. It's essentially the subdivisions. So we're not getting any of the subdivisions here in the corners of the mouth. So I might instead, oops, I'm going to change this back to just regular cap. Create single object, check that on. Alt G, put it in a folder, mouth, and we're just going to drag in a bevel deformer. Again, just readjust the hierarchy, go to use angle, and now we're getting in all the angles that we want. And we can just adjust the subdivision amount, and now we can get some nice curvature on these edges here. We can also increase, say, the offset amount. Great. And let's just select the spline and move it into position. And you notice that if we try and rotate it, right, that thing starts to happen where it's not in the right direction. So we just go to the extrude and just rotate it here. Go back into the arc and position it. Right, and then we can scale it down and position it where we want it to. Maybe bring it in a little bit more. Great. Good. So now we're going to get some eyes on our cactus. So for the eyes, it's going to be really simple. We're just going to use spheres. Again, prefer to work in hexahedron mode so we don't have any of those poles on the bottom or top. Scale the sphere down and just bring it up into a decent position. So too big, let's bring it down. Nice. So we just repositioned our spheres and mouth to make them just a little bit more friendlier, and again give a little bit more visual interest to our character. So now that's good. So now we can add some cactus spikes. So we're going to use a primitive object. We're going to use a cone. I'm just going to adjust the overall size of the cone. So bottom radius, let's try 1. Height, let's try 2. So in comparison, might be a little too small. So let's change the height to 4. Bottom radius, maybe 2. Just the height again to 8. There we go, that looks pretty good compared to the cactus. Cool. Spike. Put these in the null. Eyes. Spike is just going to be spike. So now we want to distribute the spikes along the surface of our cactus. And we can do so by using a cloner. So this is a MoGraph cloner. And if we drag the spike under the cloner, nothing happens. That's because we need to tell the cloner, hey, I want you to look at this object of our cactus to be the source in which the geometry that's a child of it is to be distributed on. So we're going to change from mode, from linear to object, and we'll get this panel here, and here we can drag in any object that we want to be the source area, to have our child be distributed on. So we're going to drag in the cactus. Nothing happens. That's because it's trying to put it on the null, but that's not exactly what we want. So to fix this, we can put it under a connect object. So we just rename this to cactus cloner, and now drag in the connect object, it starts to work. So the connect object essentially takes all these elements and tells the program to look at everything as one mesh. But the spikes aren't in the right orientation, and we can just adjust this by changing the up vector. Okay, so that didn't work. So let's try by going into the transform tab and adjusting the rotation manually. Oops, go back, change this back to none. There we go. So let's change this to -90. Oops, -90. And this is looking really good. But we might want to just push them out a little bit more, because they kind of sunk in a little bit. Actually, we'll change this back to 0. That's okay. It looks good, I think, as it does. And we want to add a little bit more spikes, so we can change the count here to add in more if we want. We can go past 100 if we wanted to. Like most things in Cinema, the slider might stop, but we can put in a custom value. So I think maybe 75 would be pretty good. And we can change the seed here. So this is just different variations. That one. So just kind of scroll through and see which one we like. I kind of like this one, actually. So we're getting some spikes on the eyes and the mouth, which is not exactly what we want. So we can add in a effector. So we're going to add in a plane effector. You notice everything just kind of shoots out, and that's okay. It's just changing everything in that Y direction. Now, if nothing happens, just go back in your cloner and make sure the effector is in the tab and then the window here. We can just drag it in. So we go to our effector, and we want to turn our position because we don't want to affect the position, but we want to affect the scale. I'm going to go uniform scale, -1. So everything disappears. That's because it's being essentially scaled down to 0. So from 1 to -1. And we can add a fall off. So we can add let's do box fall off. So everything where this box fall off is, none of the spikes will appear. So this main box is a maximum value of -1, or whatever the parameters are set here. And then this light pink box is the start of the fall off effect. And we can just adjust this by go to remap, change the inner offset, so now everything that this box is going to be set to -1. And we're just going to set this to the general area of the face, so that way we don't have any more intersections of the eyes and mouth. It's a no-go zone. And then our cloner, we're just going to name this spikes, and we're just going to put it into a null object and name it spikes. And hierarchy is important. So we want the cloner to be first, create the geometry, and then create that fall off effect. Great. So now this is looking really good. Perfect. Gonna save it. And now we want to add just a little bit more character to our cactus. To do so, we're just going to add another sphere, scale it down, bring it out. We're just going to change it again to a hexahedron, scale it down, bring it in, and just kind of adjust it. Here. So actually, instead of, I'm just going to go into the spikes and just hide this so we don't see the box. We actually, instead of having our mouth be on the outside, we want to make it on the inside of the mesh. I'm just going to hide this sphere for now. So how do we do that? Well, quite simple. We're going to use something called a bool. So to get the bool, we're going to go to the tab here, click and hold, and go to bool. So now we can put in our cactus, make it a child, and our mouth. Switch the order, and boom. We have a mouth that is essentially cuts out the mesh. Bool just essentially creates a Boolean operation between whatever the two objects that you place in your mesh. So right now it's A subtract B. So subtracting the mouth from the cactus, we can union them, so merge them together. We can just do the intersection of those, A without B, so it doesn't close the actual hole, which is what we want. So we're just going to change the A subtract B, and then yeah, keep that off. This is good. This is what we want. And again, because this is procedural, we can always go back in and adjust that bevel if we wanted to, the shape of the mouth, or anything like that. So now if we go back to our sphere, let's rename this mouth. Go back to our sphere. This is going to be like our little tongue for our cactus. So this is going to be good. And when we texture it, it'll all look really good. I'm just going to name this tongue. Great. So our base cactus is complete, and now we can go on to texture it. So for texturing in this video, I'm just going to be sticking with the standard C4D built-in materials. You can also use Octane Render Engine, Arnold Render Engine, or Redshift, or V-Ray, or any other third-party render engine that you might want to use. A lot of them have 30-day trials, so definitely go check them out because they are industry standards. I'll probably also show you a version how to create this in Octane, just for a quick demonstration. So to create materials, we're going to double click in this window here to create materials. So we're going to name this one the base. So this is going to be the base material for our cactus. So we double click, it opens up our material. And for the color, we can set the base color to green. Nothing happens, that's because we need to apply it to our cactus. So we can drag and drop it onto the actual cactus mesh here, right? So that works. Or we can drag it onto the mesh here. I'm just going to stick with dragging and dropping it on here, and this is really good. Great. I'm going to put it green on the spikes too. Actually, we're going to make these separate ones. Spikes. So we're going to open up the base material, make sure it has base in the name. And for the color, we're going to add under texture, noise. we're going to add a noise pattern to our mesh here. So if we open up the noise, we can play with all the different presets of noises that C4D offers when it ships. I'm going to use electric for this purpose, just because I really like it. It's quite a good material to work with. If you want to see what it's going to look like at render time, you can hit the render view mode here, and this is what it's going to look like. Or you can hit Alt R and get a interactive preview region for our model, and we can adjust the quality of our IPR here by selecting the triangle slider and dragging it up or down respectively. So we want to change the scale so it's skewed in one direction to get variation in color to essentially emulate stripes that a cactus might have. So we can adjust the, I'm just going to turn off this for now. We can adjust the relative scale. Change this to world. I'm just going to keep it like that. So we're going to change this back to 100 because I think it's actually X, Y, and Z. So I'm going to change this to like 1000. Yep. Great. It's a little too much, so let's go down to maybe 500. 250. Let's do 333. That's looking pretty good. We might want to just kind of expand it out just a little bit more. So I'm going to do, let's see, 250 and then 250. Let's do 150. 150. Great. Now we can go in and adjust the low clip and high clip. So then we can just get different areas that we want to have. Might even want to increase this back up to 500 to get more striations in our cactus. So you notice our cactus has some seams here in our texture. So we go in, we can change the space to texture space, and it'll fix that. But our proportions are off, and we can just go in and really kind of crank these up and adjust them. Nope. Let's do 35. 50. 50. So really it's just kind of experimenting and seeing what looks good and where you can kind of push it and take it. So I'm just going to play around for a little bit more, and then I'll show you the settings that I achieved to get the result. So these are the settings that I got for the cactus here. Take a look and you can copy them, or if you found your own that works better, definitely use that instead if you want. So we go back out, we notice it's still black and white, so we want the black area to be like a green for the base cactus. And we want the white to maybe be like a offset, like a brownish color or something like that. Great. So we have that base done. Let's just create a new material. I'm going to name this eyes. We're actually going to set this to black material. Put on the eyes, the inside of the mouth. Just let me zoom in. And then I'm just gonna duplicate this mouth. I'm gonna name it like we're actually gonna make it a pinkish, reddish color. Drag it onto the mouth. Great, and then we can add like a clay texture or material to the pot here. I'm gonna give it like a clay, kind of orangey. Reddish orange material. Great. We want the eyes just to be a little bit more reflective and give a little bit more lifelike to our character. So I'm actually going to duplicate this material because we have the same material for the inner mouth. So we're just going to go in and just replace that mouth material because we want to use different materials on those. So for reflectance, I'm just going to remove the default specular. You notice that white specular highlight of our eyes disappear. We can add in our own. So we're going to add in a GGX. And so that gives it like a metal material, which isn't exactly what we want, but we can just adjust this to get the effect that we want. So I'm going to add the layer color to black. Actually a little bit like a grayish color. And you notice we get these nice kind of highlights in the eyes that give a little bit more personality. And when we add lights in the scene, it'll look a lot better when we catch those highlights of the lights on the eyes. We just add a little bit more roughness. Yeah, there we go, perfect. We'll do it 23. Great. Save it. Perfect. So now we're going to add some lights into the scene and then render this guy out. So we're going to add a sick to the background, and this is just going to be like a stage that we can use to put objects in and get really nice renders from that. So I'm going to use a plane and just stretch it out really long, wide both ways. And we just want to see the polygons here. And we're going to add a bend deformer to our plane. Go to the Object tab and adjust the strength. We're going to increase the segments. Let's do 100 and 100. C makes it editable. Great, bend deformer. Actually, we're just going to delete that and just add in another one. Sometimes it doesn't work like this, so if we try rotating it, right, it'll start to work, which is kind of silly, but it works in the end. Fit the parent again, and get this nice kind of even curvature of our plane. Let's bring it back a little bit, and we're going to increase the bend strength. I'm just going to probably bring the plane back just a little bit more, so it's not on the exact curvature. So we kind of get this nice studio effect with like a backdrop, which is really nice. Save it. Okay, now we're going to start adding in some lights and kind of lighting it to appeal for our renders. So for all the lights, we see the light bulb here. Click and hold, and we get all these different options for lights. So if we hit this dotted line here, we can undock that panel and still have access to everything inside. We also want to add a camera. So I just click and just bring in a regular camera. Click the little square here, and that makes us in that camera view. So I just want to zero out these rotations. Just kind of line it up and adjust the focal length to 50. 50 is always a good go-to. It's like a typical portrait lens, or decent lens to just use in general. We don't get minimal warping, which is really nice. And then, so that's good to go. We can add, so if we right click, we can add a protection tag to our camera. So now we can't move around in the camera and edit it by accident. We can see our camera in our viewport here. So a cool trick that I like to use is use one view for the camera view, middle click, and then set another view as another navigation view. Turn display to ground. So now we have one view on our camera and one view to navigate in, which is good for just getting two views at once. So we add in an area light, and we can right click C4D tags, add a target tag, and then bring in, let's say, just the tongue, because it's in the center of our object for the target object, and our light will face that tongue object wherever we put it in the scene. So we can go back into our perspective view, hit Alt R, and get a good idea of what exactly our render will look like. So in our light, we want to turn on shadows. We're going to add area shadow so we can get some nice shadows of our cactus here. And lighting is kind of tricky, but there's good rules of using like a 3-point lighting setup. So we're going to have this is going to be our key light, or actually our rim light, excuse me. Okay, let's make that a little bit bigger. So the rim light is really going to get those nice kind of highlights of our object here in our scene. We might want to increase the intensity to like 150 or so and get those nice licks of light in our character. So we don't want our light here to affect our background, so we can go into the light here, go to project, and this is essentially like light linking in Maya, where we can exclude how lights affect our certain objects in our scene. So now it's not affecting our background, but it's only affecting our character, which is what we want. So we'll name this rim, and then this one is going to be our key light. So with the key light here, this is going to be like that main light giving light to our object here. And lighting in general is very important because light makes everything look good in the first place, and a good lighting system can really enhance models and textures. It's just really important to get good lighting. So we turned off the rim so we can just see what this key light is doing, which is what we want. But it's also, again, because we copy and pasted it, it's excluding the background, but we want it to include the background, so we get some kind of shadows there. It's a little too bright, so we're just going to turn down the intensity, say 75. It's a little too dark, so let's do 115. It's looking really good. Cool. Okay, so we're a key light, and now we just want to add a fill light because this area here is a little too dark. And in general, nothing is ever really black in terms of lighting in a scene. So it's always nice to have little pools of light in any scene. So we're just going to copy and paste this and just name it to fill. Turn off our key so we just have our fill light. And this is going to be really subtle light. Let's try maybe 25%. And we're just trying to fill in the areas here. And let me decrease the scale a little bit of this light. So we put all of them together. Right, we're getting decent lighting in our character here. Creating material, add on to the background here. Great. And you notice we get a little bit of noise here in our shadows, and we can just select all of our lights, go to our shadow tab, and just increase the maximum amount of samples. So we can turn this to say 64, then do 256. I'm going to turn this off and actually render out this window. You notice a lot of the green cleans up, but it takes longer to render because there's more samples being calculated. I'm also just going to bring the background just up a little bit more. And you can notice because we put a bevel on the pot here, we're getting nice kind of highlights of our lights here as well. And then reflections in the eyes are also really important to give it a sense of life. You can also go in and look online for textures of like a clay pot and put it in the color channel and the bump channel to give it like a sense of depth. Yeah, so that's that with the regular C4D standard materials and lighting. And now I'm going to show you how to do it in another third-party render application. In this case, I'll be using Octane Render Engine. So I just turned off the materials, kind of reset the scene, but I did keep all the lights in just because we can actually use the same lights because Octane is built into Engine, so a lot of the similar functionality works throughout the program. But in order to do so, we just need to select the lights and add a Octane tag. I'm going to add actually Octane light tag, so it recognizes that these are Octane lights. So now if we go to the Octane tab and open up the live viewer window, save real quick because it tends to crash sometimes. It opens up, and if we render it, right, we get our cactus, little happy cactus. But everything is really too bright because these values in our tags overwrite the actual values in the general light setting. So I'm going to start with the rim light, and we want to project it from the background. And to do this, and we also see in the viewport, we want to turn off camera visibility. And then go to the background, we can add in a Octane object tag. Right, so if we want to disable it from the background, we can change the light pass ID to something different than all the other ones. For example, we'll just use 2 in this case. And then go into our light pass mark, enable, and turn off 2. And now, because they're both being recognized as number 2, it'll affect the actual geometry, but not the psych background that we have created. And we want our base lighting, because right now our base lighting is kind of like this neutral tone, but we want to change that to be completely black, so we can add in a texture environment. Make sure to change it to primary, which it already is. Go into the texture tab here and just change the color to black. Now if we add a rim light, now we can just see our rim light being affected on our object here. Now we can go into our key light, way too bright, so I'm going to turn it down. Let's do 17, see how it works. Looks pretty good. Fill light. This fill light needs to be super subtle, so I'm going to adjust this to maybe 2.5. maybe even 1. So we all turn them on. Looking pretty decent, but we need to add some materials to our scene. So what's really nice about Octane, it uses the graphics card on your computer. However, you need to have a NVIDIA GPU in order to use it. And it's also a unbiased render engine, so it actually calculates every photon that's being emitted from the light sources. So to create Octane materials, we can go to the Octane Live Viewer window, open it up again, materials, and here we have a whole bunch of materials that we can use. I know like really like the diffuse materials are quite popular now on Instagram that you can use. So we can do something like that, which I think we might try and go for. And I'm just going to dock this by hitting the squares up here. Just dock it to the side so we can see our viewport and our IPR here. And for our camera, we want to add just the Octane camera tag so it recognizes that it is an Octane camera. So we're going to name this base Cactus. And I just like assigning it colors so I know what exactly it's applied to. Right, base Cactus. Pot, I'm going to change this to a clayish color. Throw it on the pot. Spikes, put on here. I'm going to name this eyes, but we want the eyes again to have some kind of reflection because it gives a little bit more lifelike and personality to the character. So we can change the material type here from diffuse to glossy, and it gives it a nice specular highlight. Let's change this to black, and we'll give it a little bit of roughness. And eyes. Right, so right away you can see that we're getting a nice specular highlight from our eyes here and the lights that we have. And then one more for the mouth, or the tongue rather. We'll change this to like a pinkish color. So we have our general shape or colors laid out here, which is really nice. We can increase the amount of samples here. So right now it's on direct lighting, but if we change it to path tracing, it calculates the secondary light rays. But we're just going to keep it on direct lighting for now, and maybe turn up the max samples to 512, so it cleans up just a little bit more. Turn up diffuse depth because we have diffuse channels, and turn down specular depth because we don't have any glassy materials in our scene. Great. Save it. And we're going to add some stripes on our cactus. So we go to the node editor. This might seem a little intimidating at first, but I promise it's not. It's quite easy once you kind of get the hang of it. So we're going to add in a noise and just pipe it into the diffuse channel. And right away you can see our noise is being displayed. We can change it to different types. So we have Perlin, turbulence, circular, chips. I'm probably going to use turbulence. Actually, I'll use Perlin. Gonna increase the gamma a little bit and increase the contrast. And we want to adjust, like we did the C4D material, the scale that's being projected on. So we want it to warp and stretch in one direction. So we can add a UVW transform node, and we can turn off lock aspect ratio and adjust that stretching. But you notice, similar to the other one, we can see the seams in of our cactus here, and it's not looking too great. So to fix this, we can just go to projection and just change the projection mode to box. And that'll fix it up. And we can fix that stretching here in the actual projection mode. and it's not working great. There we go. We can use cylinder, and it cleans up quite nicely. So it's just trying to figure out which one works best for your model and kind of tailoring it to that. Save it. Now we just want to add some color into it. Might want to give a little bit more contrast. A little more gamma. We can turn up the octaves to get a little bit more detail. Turn down omega, and that's essentially how twisty and turny the pattern is. So for color, we can use a gradient node, drag it in and drop it, and essentially it'll remap the colors from this noise into whatever colors we put this gradient to. So the blacks we want to be green, and then the whites we want to be kind of like a brownish color. We don't see it too much, so we can just go back in, maybe decrease the gamma. Now we can see it. That's really good. We can see a little bit, but not too much. And it's not distracting from the image. Maybe for our spikes, we want to add a little bit of glossiness to it. So we want to change the material type from diffuse to glossy. We can see some nice hits of light, the specular highlights from that rim light in the back hitting that. Maybe just increase the roughness. Good. And maybe we want to just increase it to be just a little bit lighter. Great. So now for the pot, we can go in and just add a little bit of detail to that. So we can use another noise texture. We see the seam. That's okay. We can just change, like we did the other one, the projection type. Let's see if box works. Nope, we can still see the seam. So let's try cylindrical. Great, that looks looking a lot better. And this adds color variation, which is really important because variation really sells the image. Add a gradient node. And just kind of remap these colors. We can also add the noise here to a bump channel if we wanted to, and this is the power of or one of the benefits of using the node editor. So we can, instead of copy and pasting it into the different channels, we can just click on the node here and just drag it into the bump channel. And you notice we get a little bit of bump detail here, which gives it some surface deviations. We can add in a color correction node to our bump and increase the contrast. So now we can really see it pop, but we don't want it that much. So let's tone it back a lot. Great. We might want to see what it looks like if we use glossy material. Add a little roughness. Nice, we get those nice highlights here in the front and back. It's looking really good. For the background, let's give it like a gray material. Maybe try to make it a little bit more whiter. The 70 looks fine. And if we wanted to, we can adjust it. We can put in fill lights here to increase that, or make the background just a little bit lighter. I feel like this is fine for now. And what's really cool with Octane, because it is a unbiased render engine and uses the GPU, it updates really quickly. It also has a lot of really cool features that we can play around with and really get a nice result inside the program without having to go into Photoshop or any other post-production software to fine-tune our image. So we can go into the camera imager, enable that, turn on a vignette if we want, increase the saturation. I think maybe 2 is good. Saturate to white if we wanted to. Which just helps with a little bit more color accuracy. Thin lens, so this is used if you want nice depth of field. So real quick, I'll duplicate this camera, delete the protection tag. Right, so if we want like an up close shot, we can go into here, turn off autofocus, pick the focus picker here. Maybe you want to focus on his eyes and have the pot be blurry from depth of field. Turn the f-stop down. Right, we can get a nice depth of field shot really quickly, and really kind of experiment and play around, get really fast turnaround time iterations with that. Can zoom out a little bit. Look, he looks a little blurry. Use the pick focus to fix that right up. Perfect. Save it. We have a couple of different cameras here, so we can switch back and forth between them. Motion blur if you're doing animation. Post-processing is really nice. Can add some bloom if we wanted to. Just a little tiny bit, I suppose. And then we can add in different custom LUTs, which is a lookup table if we wanted to. So there's presets in here. We can add in our own, and this can drastically change the image by essentially changing the values of the colors. So let me find my LUT folder. Right, so this is the alien blue. Just go through some here. Right, so it really drastically changes the image by just remapping the colors essentially. Has some cool black and white ones if we wanted to. Those are really nice to play around really quickly within the software and knock out different iterations quite quickly. And this is the power of a lot of the third-party render applications that are industry standard. Great. So I'm just going to go through and just kind of clean up this image a little bit more. I'll do a quick time-lapse video showing what exactly I'm changing, and we'll see how that goes. Okay, and here we are with the 2 images that I rendered out of my cactus. If you don't have this window open, you can just go to Window and then go to Picture Viewer and it'll open it up. And in here, if you want, you can maybe adjust some of your saturation or contrast settings or anything like that, and then export it. Or you can bring it into Photoshop or After Effects or any other photo editing / manipulation software that you want, and color correct it there. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Hopefully it wasn't too long for you guys to watch, and definitely hope you learned a lot and get started in this journey of what is 3D. There's always something to learn, and I hope you guys just keep on learning and experiment and try new things. See you next time.